And 2 years later, you opened the Vekoma Madhouse, that is Hex, and obviously started to work on Secret Weapon 5. You also built Colossus at Thorpe Park at this point. It feels to me that you really hit your stride.
Yes, and it was at this point. You see, when we first did Chessington, Madame Tussauds were artists. They were a bit sniffy when it came to, fun fairs and stuff, and they didn't really want anything to do with what we were doing, but they quite fancied the idea of being involved in a dark ride. So they designed a ride that it was a lovely ride. It was called the Fifth Dimension, which not many people remember now, but it was a bit obscure, and it's gone through lots of different iterations since. But apart from that, Madame Tussauds, the fun fairs were a bit beneath them, and theme parks were a bit beneath them. After we did, when it came to Nemesis, well, they weren't involved in the haunted house or the runaway train, but when it came to Nemesis, they started to, their appetites were whet a bit. And I used John Knowles at Madame Tussauds Studios to come up with the visuals of the Nemesis creature and the Nemesis styling, and he did a wonderful job. And what you see there today in terms of the monster and the overall style pattern was John Knowles at Tussauds Studios. Once Nemesis opened, Tussauds thought, this is rather nice. This is fun. It's like Toys Afternoon on a Friday. Let's get involved. So gradually they became more and more involved. So they were heavily involved in styling Oblivion, and then when it came to Hex, that was very, very much theirs. The storyboarding. I worked very closely with them. We looked for because it was allegedly within the towers, although everybody knows it's a cheat. You go in through the towers, but the English Heritage and the planners and everybody wouldn't let us do anything to the building. So the actual ride of Hex is in a building not just outside the towers, but separated. They insisted that the foundations had to be outside of the moat that goes around the back of the towers. So it's well separated, but because allegedly the ride told the story of the towers, we looked for some kind of plausible story that we could use as the theme of Hex. And it was Les Davis, who was the unofficial historian of Alton Towers, who worked at the park, who told us about the chained oak, the legend of the chained oak. And we said, well, of course, it's just a legend, isn't it? And he said, well, the oak exists. We said, really? So we put on our coats. It was a filthy cold, windy winter's day. We put on our coats, trudged out the office, crossed the road, walked through the woods, and when we saw the actual oak tree with the chains around it, the hairs on the backs of our necks went up. It really was weird. It was not difficult to work out that this was the right story. So Vekoma, who built a number of these madhouses, were engaged to produce the ride, and then Tussauds Studios came up with the more detailed storyline and theming and so on. And that was when they really did start to make their mark on the attractions, and everyone after that had more and more of them. And now, of course, with Merlin, with Merlin Magic Making, they are the creators of the attractions. And I retired, well, I tried to retire about 8 years ago, and then I was sort of pulled back on a number of other projects. But basically, the recent Alton Towers rides are Merlin attractions, and now I've taken a complete back seat because it's in very capable hands. you've got a lot of very talented people that are producing some pretty fantastic stuff.